All right, and good day to everyone, and welcome to today's session from A Course in Miracles. And my name is Oliver Blue, and I am so delighted that you have joined us today for this workbook lesson 181. And we're so excited coming out of this last review period, and we are now prepared to make even a stronger commitment and more focused goals and what our intentions are here as we have given ourselves over to a what I call a commitment that is to the absolute truth. And this is a commitment that is continually to get stronger as we go along this journey of transforming and renewing our minds, because we've come to realize that it is our responsibility to renew our minds. That means that it will take training and practice. It's like when two parents decide to come together and to produce a child. The parents also come to understand that it is their responsibility to train that child and to help that uh, that child grow and develop so that it can become a strong, healthy, viable adult. And and to neglect the training and the nurturing of a child is to neglect their very own self, because that child will come up if not trained in the ways of truth, to be a pain in their hearts. And likewise, if we neglect our responsibility to renew our mind, to transform our minds, to bring our minds back to the truth, if we neglect that, then our minds really become a huge thorn in our life. But we're so happy and grateful this morning that we've made a this committed decision to be responsible for the training and the renewing of our mind, that we may prove, like the scripture says, that we may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God, what is the perfection by which God created us. That is what we're out to prove. That's what we're out to demonstrate. That's what we're out to uh, grab a hold on. We want to know our true purpose. We want to understand the meaning for us being in this experience. And it is in the knowing and it is in the understanding that we find joy and happiness and purpose and significance. It is in the knowing of ourselves that we build this uh, image of ourselves, this self concept of ourselves. Our self-image becomes that of the image of God. We become in tune, in harmony with which God created us, and so we much more easily uh, accept and fulfill our role and our function in this world, in this incarnation. And so today we start a new journey of 20 new lessons where we're going to be getting more and more in depth into becoming more firm about our commitment. and our goal through our practice. And it says here that we are being asked to practice now in order to obtain the sense of peace such unified commitment will restore. It says it is experiencing this unified commitment that makes us sure that we will give our total willingness to following the way the course sets forth. And it's also said, it said, and so we start our journey beyond words by concentrating first on the impedes, on what impedes our progress still. So there's still blocks, there's still veils, there's still not 100% certainty about our identity. And so those things still become blocks to the awareness of love's presence. Because remember, this course is not aimed at teaching what love is, but it's aimed at helping us to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And love presence has to do with our true self. It has to do with our oneness with our Creator. It's an experience of what exists beyond our defensiveness remains beyond achievement, while it is in denial. In other words, there's still something that we are to achieve that is beyond the little doubts, beyond the hesitation that we still have to give ourselves over completely to the truth. It may be there, but you cannot accept its presence. So we now attempt to go past all our defenses. We still are working to lay down every defense, every resistance to the truth of our reality. We have made great progress from day one, but there's still more of this processing that has to occur. And it says, and we do that by laying down all our defenses, all the fences that we have built in our minds, all the fences that we have, all the shrines that we have erected, all the altars that we have built that is not built on the innocence and the sinlessness and the wholeness and completeness that we are. There's still some things. There's still some blocks that we got to get after, and we're going to get after those blocks. And we do it wholeheartedly, knowing that it is Christ's vision that we're after. It is God that is at work within us to will and to do of his good pleasure, which is our grand pleasure. And so no more than this is being asked, because no more than this is needed. It will be enough to guarantee the rest will come. So there is so much more that we're going to experience as we stay on this journey of transformation. And so we start out with lesson 181. And it says, I trust my brothers. I trust humanity. Right there, I can imagine what thoughts may arise. I trust my brothers who are one with me. That is the thought for today. Because obviously, if this is the thought for today, there's a problem that we have with trusting humanity within the dream of separation. This trust is not a trust that is referring to an illusion or an illusionary self or a made self. This trust is based on what God placed within all of us. God knows what he placed in all of us in creation, and that is what we can trust. Not the man, not the self-made personal identity, but we're talking about that which God created, which is that which connects all of us, because that which we made divides all of us. That which we have tried to substitute for the truth, it divides us, it separates us, it puts us at odds with one another and in fear of one another. And that's what we mistakenly in error made as a substitute for the truth. Because the truth is, we are one with each other, we're one with God, and we are love, just as God is. That's the truth. That's what never changes. That was what never alters. But something, we have placed something in between that reality and have made something else instead. And so we're here to remove that made something else. We call them blocks. The blocks to the awareness of our true self. We call it love's presence because we are love's presence. We are always present. Love is always present. Love is always here and now. Who you really are is always present. But who we choose to be, which is not anything close to reality, is the block that we place between ourselves and reality. And we got to remove that block. And we've been on that journey to do that. And we've made progress, like I said. And so the trust that we're talking about is the trust based upon what God created, not based upon what we made. So trusting your brother is essential. Trusting humanity is essential to establish and holding up your confidence in your ability to transcend doubt and lack of sure conviction in yourself. In other words, your ability to transcend doubt and lack in your own life, where you're not doubting yourself, or where you're not having and holding on to a sense of lack, a sense of incompletion, holding on to a self-image of yourself that has no certainty or surety or confidence. He said the way that you transcend that is by the trust that we place upon all other humanity. And that trust is not based on what humanity has made of themselves, but what God placed within each one of us. In other words, we're acknowledging the perfection that we all were created in. In other words, we're making a concerted decision, a committed decision to look past what the error, to look past the mistakes that we have made and look beyond that to the light that is the reality of all of us. And that takes training, that takes discipline, that takes intention. And that's what we're got to get a little more focused now. We're getting a little more focused. As you know, this course, as it moves along, it is bringing a whole lot more focus to what the mind is thinking. A little more focus away from the past and away from the future. The focus is now on this present moment, in this present moment, in this instant of time, in this holy instant. How are you perceiving yourself? How are you perceiving others? This course is teaching you that your peace lies beyond what you see with your natural eye. But your peace has been placed within your ability to know and to practice the truth. And as we do that, we practice seeing out of what Christ's vision and not out of our own. We train ourselves to look out of the innocence that we all are versus out of the sin consciousness that we all trained ourselves in. And so trusting your brother is essential. Now, when we say trusting your brother, again, we're trusting what God placed in all of us, not what a person may have made of themselves, or even not what a person may be thinking of himself. He's not thinking correctly. That's not what we're trusting in. That's not what the course is asking us to do. That would be ludicrous for us to place our trust in separation. That's what we would be saying. But what we're saying is now that we understand the reality of who all of us are, the perfection in which all of us were created, That is what we placed our trust in. That's what God has trust. That's what God has placed His trust in. God believes in all of us. He don't believe in what we made. God believes and knows and convinced about that what He created in the creation process is His very own self, and so He has confidence in Himself that He placed within us. That's where He placed it in us, as our identification. And as we remove the blocks that we have placed between ourself and that reality, it will become more evident to us of who we are and who our brother is. And so we begin to trust that which God placed. Because really, in reality, there's only the one self, and it's the God self. All other selves are illusions, are phonies, are temporary. They're not the real. They're not the real you. And so it's about knowing and believing and trusting and accepting that which God made, that which God created only. And so if you're going to see it in yourself, you have to also first see it in your brother. So how do we get the mind disciplined to see that way, to perceive that way? That's what we're engaged in here. So when you attack a brother, notice now, so when we attack a brother, either physically or mentally or, verbally, however, we attack them because we see a threat. Notice that. It says, when you attack a brother, you proclaim that he is limited by what you have perceived of him, and that our perception of him is based on separation. It's not based on what God created, but it's based on what we made of ourselves. Therefore, we see it in our brother, and we see it as a threat. So therefore, we attack. And basically, we're attacking ourselves. That's why the Course says, attack is never justified. Anger is never justified. It's anger and attack is only justified in the mind of the separated one. And there's no way you're going to get to peace down that road. And so it says, this is the way we perceive them. And so we go on the attack. And this is the way we perceive ourselves. And so it says, you do not look beyond your brother's errors. Notice here it says, it didn't say your brother's sins, it said your brother's errors. Because listen, all of us have erred in our ways. All of us have mistaken or made mistakes in our ways because of a belief in separation. But we have labeled those beliefs sins, which are punishable by death. In that mindset, that is a system that's a system of the law that man has made. It is not the law of God. The law of God is love. The law of God is love, where there is no sin. There is no sin. There's no system of sin. The system of sin and sin conscious, which leads to sin consciousness, meaning that our mind now is focused in the present only on the fact that we have somehow broken God's law, and it's punishable by death. And so that's what brings on the sin consciousness, and that's what brings on our misperceptions of ourselves and others. That's what brings on a self-image of ourselves and others as enemies and separate, in defense, in armaments, and kill or be killed. That's where it comes from. That's not the mind of Christ. That's not a mind of the one that's been created in perfection. So that is what we have to let go of. And so it says here that we focus on our brother's errors. That's why we go on the attack. It says rather the errors, they are magnified. Notice now, we have totally gone blind to the reality of who our brother is and who we are. and to the point that the brothers' mistakes and errors are magnified in our thinking, becoming blocks. And so this is how we build walls within our minds. It's how we imprison ourselves. And it all comes from an idea of separation, which leads to an idea of sin, guilt, and fear. And it builds walls, or what it calls here blocks. It says, rather than they magnify, these are errors. And these are errors and mistakes that can be corrected. So just think about it. An error can be corrected, a mistake can be corrected. When you talk about someone's sins have to be what? Punishable. They have to be atoned for. And then the whole concept that we made up, where you go find something innocent to atone for that which is guilty. It makes no sense either. And we built a whole religious system on that process. And at the end of that process, you still got what? You got a community full of sin-conscious people. You got a community full of people that still sense a threat, still believe that they must what? Defend themselves. People that still believe in separation based on what? Body identification. And then, the list of things that go with that, race and nationality and gender and how one loved and who one loved, and all that stuff gets caught up in there. You can never find your way out of that. It puts you in a labyrinth or a maze. And that's what the ego thought system wants to do. Put you in a maze of confusion. But all we're doing is judging ourselves by judging one another. And so it says, these errors that we perceive our brothers based on an error that they may have made, he said, rather they are magnified, becoming blocks to our awareness of the true self that lies beyond our own mistakes and past his seeming sins as well as yours. So we have created a system. We did this. Humanity did this. This has nothing to do with a loving Father. Because we've already established God is love, and so therefore, so we are. And love senses no threat. Love senses no need for attack. Love only sees itself as love. Well, we have made a system as a substitute for that. And we've given God responsibility for that system, which is wrong. It's error. It is in error. We have made of God an unloving Father. Say that he demands punishment, he demands blood, that he demands, anything from that which he created. God doesn't even demand anything of himself. God just is. And what God creates just is. But we the one that set up this system, this bloodbath system, this system of judgment, this system of punishment, this system of separation, this system of division and strife and envy and anger and wrath. And we've done it in the name of God. And it's wrong. It's an error. It's an error that can be corrected. And that's why the course was given to us, to correct our thinking. That's why Jesus came 2,000 years ago, to correct the thinking of humanity, because humanity was thinking of themselves the way they thought about God. And so they created these systems of laws, these rituals, and went on a bloodbath, killing innocent animals, and even killed the truth when the truth came to them in love in the form of Jesus Christ. It was the religious community that did this now. And so here we are in 2024, still having a bloodbath on each other. perceiving one another as still guilty, perceiving one another as still different, not acknowledging the sinlessness and the innocence and the guiltlessness that we are. We but repeat the same error over and over again. And that's why the course repeats it's these truths over and over again. You may say, "Well, Oliver, I heard you say that 50 times in 181 lessons." Well, that's the only way you're going to undo what we did is by creating a thought system of separation, sin, guilt, and fear. We need repetition to undo it because it was repetition that did it. Repetition is important. It's important for you to see who you really are over and over and over and over and over again. In fact, the Course says we have allowed our minds to become so undisciplined that we have seen ourselves as guilty and deserving of punishment over and over and over and over again to the point that we begin to carry it out. And it's not the will of God. That's not even the will that we would have for ourselves. But when there's blocks that we have erected, when there's resistance to the truth that we erect, that's the end result. When the mind is left to itself, it will go into a self-destructive mode. But a mind that is disciplined and brought to the truth, and through repetition, is disciplined to think along the line of its reality. That mind becomes what? That mind becomes the mind of God. And it begins to perceive not only itself, but perceive all living things, all humanity, from the point of view or the point of reference of love. And their perception inspires them into action of only love, acts of love. And the result of the acts of love is peace and joy and happiness. And that is what we desire. And so it says perceptions. So let's back up. Trusting each other is essential to establishing and holding up our confidence and our ability to transcend doubt and lack. And the way we do that is that we have to change our perception. Perception has to do with how we see things, how we interpret things. And there's only two ways. There's only really one way to interpret things, and that is through the eyes of truth, or through the eyes of Christ, or the mind of God, to interpret it through the truth, or the light, or love. But when we decide to fall asleep to that way and make another way, notice now, God has created the only way, and then we decide to make another way based on our individual belief in our individual self-made self-image of ourselves that is not based on truth. What that results in is a world that you see in the events and activities of the world that you see that is charged with fear and lack and atrocities and self-willed bodies with the mindset of what? Kill or be killed. And that's not the will of God. And that's not the will that we would hold for ourselves, but that's what the end result of when we go our own way. I'm so glad that we have made a committed decision to go these 365 days into renewing our mind, to not being transformed, not being conformed to this world, not being conned by this world, not being conned by the systems of this world, not being conned by the thought system of the ego. The ego has conned humanity out of its what? Out of its inheritance. But one by one, we can wake up and be transformed by the renewing of our mind, which is what we're doing in this process. And I just love it. So it's the perception. So it says perception has a focus, or it says perception has a focus, or it has to be focused. In other words, our understanding, our ability to interpret our surrounding, our fellow humanity, it has to have a focus. It has to have an intention. It has to have a purpose. If it's left to itself, if the mind left unto itself, an undisciplined mind, if left into itself, it's like a child that's left into himself and not given any guidelines and not given any direction. The child will grow up to be self-destructive and to be, you know, a threat to others. Notice now, instead of being what this child of peace and love, it becomes a child of threat, not only to himself, but to others. It's left into himself. So the mind left into himself, the mind void of truth, will eventually err towards what? Self-destruction. So this is vital what we're doing. And it's never too late to get started doing it. If you listen to me and if you're 10 years old, this is vital for you to understand. If you're 20 years old and you're just entering adulthood, this is vital for you to understand if you haven't been trained and disciplined this way. If you're 70 years old and you're just getting around to realizing that there's something that has not taken place in my life, and it has caused a whole lot of pain and suffering, and I want it to stop. It's never too late. If you're 90 years old, it's never too late. It doesn't matter. What matters is that as you open yourself up to hear the voice that speaks for God in you, and you finally say yes to that reality, that is the perfect time. Because this is the truth. God guarantees that all of us eventually will come to the point where we say there must be a better way, but we have the way that we have gone. It may not happen in this lifetime, but it can. You don't have to relive this again and again and again. I mean, think about it in dreams. You can dream the same dream over and over and over again until you eventually wake up. So you can live many, many lifetimes going through the same pain and suffering and not really ever coming to the point where you hear the voice. But right now you are hearing, if you're listening to me, you are hearing the voice that speaks for God. You're not hearing me, you're hearing the voice that speaks for God, the voice of truth. You are hearing, and it may be for the first time in your life, you're hearing the fact that you are whole and you are complete and you are perfectly made. Not the body made, but the self that you are, that you share with God. Maybe the first time you're hearing this, and that's okay. I was in my 30s when I got a sense of it, early 30s. But it was only until I was in my 40s that I got a hold of this reality. Doesn't matter when you get when the light comes, shine. It matters when you accept it. God guaranteed that He will. And so perception has a focus or has to be focused. It is this that gives consistency to what you see. Focused perception. Okay. In other words, we're no longer allowing our minds to just wander all over the place. No, our minds now have become what? In alignment with God, and in alignment with that which is the perfect will of God, which is us to come to know our true self as innocent and as whole and as complete. To come to understand that our spiritual life, our nature, is perfect. It is perfect. And it needs no modification. And it needs no improvement. Who we really are, it needs no modification or improvement. Jesus said it this way: you cannot add one jot of tittle to your reality. But what needs to be addressed is the way we perceive. What needs to be addressed is the way we interpret. Because we're perceiving, we're interpreting from a mind that appeared to be split off from its creator. And now it has a mind of its own, and not thinking through the eyes of love, not seeing through the eyes of reality, not seeing through its true self, but through a false self that it has made. Therein lies the problem. So it is that mind that we're bringing over face to face with the truth. So it can rejoin the truth that it is. It's like when a prodigal son comes home, he rejoins with the family. It's like when a wayward child decides to come home. He's rejoining with his origin. And so change, but this focus. Our focus has to be changed. It says change, but this focus, and what you behold will change accordingly. When we focus and change the perception, when we change the point of view from which we're seeing ourselves and seeing others, everything changes. Nothing outside of ourselves has to change. When you embrace the vision of Christ, when you embrace Christ's vision, when I let go of that which I had been conditioned in based on separation, and embrace the truth of oneness, that God and I are one, that all humanity has been made in the image and likeness of God, that we all share the same self, the same being, the same life, the same breath. There is but one will, and that's the will of God. When we embrace that, everything changes. The way we see, the way we feel, the way we hear. It all changes. Why? Because we now have a different point of view. The way we're seeing everything and everyone. And so we have to keep, and what comes with that is the ability to look past errors and mistakes and only see the light that is there. But that comes through a training, that comes through a practice. And that's what we're doing. And so it says change, but this focus. And what you will behold will change accordingly. Your vision now will shift. Remember, we said that what is a miracle? This book, this study guide that we have called A Course in Miracles. It's called A Course in Miracles for a reason. Why? Because it's teaching us that a true miracle is but a shift in the way we perceive. It's a shift in perception. It just takes a shift in the way we see. Just a small shift from separation to oneness. That's all it takes. And so it says, Our vision now will shift. The way we see will shift. It says to give support, to give support to the intent which has replaced the one you held before. See, the intention that we have when we're looking through the glass darkly, the intention that we have when we have blocks that don't allow us to see the reality of who we are and who our brother is. Our intention, again, is to defend ourselves. But once we remove those blocks and we see that defense only put a veil over the truth, when we remove the blocks to the awareness of love presence and see who we actually are and embrace that and accept that, it says our intentions changes. It says the intent which has replaced the one which you held before. So we don't hold that intent anymore. When your eyes open, when you really and truly experience enlightenment, your eyes open, your understanding open, and your intention changes completely. You no longer see yourself. You no longer hold a self-image of yourself that you are ashamed of. You no longer hold a self-image of yourself that appears to be private and separate from everyone else. You no longer hold a self-image of yourself that you are ashamed of. You no longer hold a self-image of yourself that has a sense of unworthiness to it. You no longer hold a self-image of yourself that has a sense of lack and scarcity. You no longer hold a self-image of yourself that has an appointment with death. You no longer have a self-image of yourself that is run by guilt and sin consciousness. So all of that completely changes. You see yourself in a whole new light. You see yourself for who you really are. You see yourself as one with God, whole and complete, nothing missing, nothing broken. And so with that insight, your perceptions of everything else changes. Your intentions change. You become the light of the world. You become every act of love. Everything that you do, everywhere you think in terms of love, because you understand that love is present and that you are part and a parcel of that. And so your vision will now shift to give support to the intent which has replaced the one you held before. So now your intention, your life purpose is to be the light of the world. Your life purpose is to be loved and to extend the love that you are. And all this has come because your awareness of the truth has been expanded. Simply because you made a shift. Shift happened. So it says, remove your focus on your brother's sin. So the new focus that we have is not on someone else's, what the world calls sin. It says, and you experience the peace that comes from faith in sinlessness. So in other words, when we make that shift to our true identity, our sinless and guiltless self, our focus now is removed from what we have focused on in the past. And that was on other people's, what we call their sin, what we label sin. And now our focus is on their sinlessness because we see ourselves sinless. And we understand that sin is not real. It's something that we made up through a false perception. It says, and you will experience the peace that comes from sinlessness. The reason we haven't experienced peace, consistent peace, is because we have what still entertain sin consciousness. That is a block. It needs to be what we move. That's a focus that we no longer what focus on. Not even on ourselves, not even on others, regardless of what's happening. Remember, mistakes and errors can be corrected. Someone make a mistake, it can be corrected. You make a mistake, it can be corrected. An error can be corrected. But a person that sees things from a perspective of sin can't be corrected. It's punishable. It's punishable by death, by the law that we made. But remember, I share with you that one scripture over in Romans, I think it was, where it says, there is no, therefore, now no more condemnation in them that are in Christ. And no longer walk after the law that we made, but walk after the law of God. And then there's another scripture that says, what the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus, or in reality, the law of the Spirit has made us free from the law of sin and death. Where did the law of sin and death come from? It came from us. We created another law called sin and death. It said, but the law of God, the law of the Spirit of life, has made us free from that. Why? Because we have transcended the law. We have walked away. We have removed our focus from the law that we made of sin and death. And now we're under the law of God, the law of love, where there is no death. Just that simple. And so it says, this faith, this confidence that we have now in seeing and focusing on our brother's sinlessness. It says, this confidence received its only sure support from what you see in others past their sin. For their mistakes. Notice that. So we don't look on sin anymore. With this shift in perception, we don't look on sin. We look on mistakes. It said, for their mistakes, they're focused on, are witnesses to sins in you. So even the mistakes now that we make, we look on the same act and we don't call it sin anymore. Mistake can be error. We don't even focus on that. It says, for that is a witness to what we see in ourselves. He said, and you will not transcend their sight and see the sinlessness that lies beyond, because of where our focus is. So our focus should not even be on the bodily error in another, but we should now, through Christ's vision, look past the error. There's something beyond that. There's a true self beyond the body, that which God created. That's what we want to trust in. That is what we want to focus on. Not only in ourselves, but in others, what God created. It's where the focus needs to be in order for us to experience the peace that we so desire. So therefore, in practicing today, so with this being the truth that we have just gone over, that our focus now needs to be turned away from sin, guilt, fear, error, mistakes, to the light that is beyond all of that. So this is what we practice today. So it says, therefore, in practicing today, we first let all such little focuses give way to our great need to let our sinlessness become apparent. So we need to turn our focus away from sin to sinlessness. We instruct our minds. Notice now what we do in the practice. You instruct your mind. Why? Because it's reminded your responsibility. So we just like we instruct the child, we instruct our minds that it is this that we seek. This what? Allowing our sinlessness to become apparent. That's what we seek. to move away from sin consciousness, guilt, and fear. It says, we instruct our minds that this is what we seek, and only this for just a little while. We do not care about our future goals. And what we saw in instant previous has no concern, meaning the past. It has no concern for us within this interval of time wherein we practice changing our intention by focusing, removing our focus from errors and mistakes and sin consciousness to sinlessness, to purity, our perfection. We remove our focus from what we made to what God created, basically what it's saying. When we're looking on sin, guilt, and fear, and we're in judgment, we're looking on what we made. But when we see the light of God that is beyond that, when we see the perfection of God that is beyond that, when we see our innocence which is beyond that, which is beyond form and time, when we look into eternity and see the truth, this is where we're shifting our focus. So we're becoming what? Heavenly minded. We're becoming what? Christ conscious. And it takes practice. It takes discipline. It takes giving yourself the command that this is where your focus is, and this is only where your focus is going to be. So you finally taking yourself by the ear and say, no, we're going this way. Because what we may want to go that way. But no, God said, no, we're going this way. And we have to get involved with the discipline of that. We have to discipline our mind, renew our mind. And it takes work, it takes practice. It says we practice changing our intent. So that's what we're going to do today. It says, I trust my brother. That's changing my intention to not trusting my brother. And when we say trusting our brother, we're trusting what God created and not what maybe the brother made. It says, who is one with us? Why? Because the same being that our brother is in reality is the same being that we are. So you see where the title is going here. And this is not our practice in the past. We have practiced in distrust. And our focus was on what we made and not what God created. And so it says, we practice changing our intention. We seek for the innocent. We seek for innocence and for nothing else. Where is this innocence? It's in our true self. It's in what God created. It's in the self that God created. Our innocence is who we really are. You are completely innocent and whole and perfect. And anything that appeared to be different than that is what we made up ourselves. The self that we made out of guilt and judgment and belief in separation. And now all we're doing is practicing, no longer giving any credence or allegiance to that self. We're only going to live from the true in reality of our wholeness and our completion and our completion and our innocence, which God created. That's who we really are. So our self-image of ourselves is completely shifted from what we made to what God created. That's what this lesson is about. And it takes practice to do that. And today, that's what we're going to practice. It says, we seek for innocence and nothing else. We seek for it with no concern but now. And so we lay the past aside. We lay the future aside, which doesn't exist. And we only deal with the here and now, the present moment. Guys, this is where we're going. It's time to get, I don't want to use the word serious, but it's time to make a firm decision about the use of our mind. We're no longer going to give our minds over to the conditioning of this world. We're no longer going to give our minds over to our hurts and our pains. Hurt and pain only comes to a mind that doesn't know who he is. Once you know that you are loved, there's nothing that can hurt you. There's nothing that can destroy you. There's no suffering in knowing of the true self. You are completely free. Who the Son sets free is free indeed. Doesn't matter what goes on in the daily lives of others, no matter what goes on in the world. You have become the substance of things hoped for. You have become the evidence of what is real. Your life, yes, your life. You have showed up to prove what is that good and acceptable, perfect will of God, and that is what your complete freedom, your complete innocence. Isn't that wonderful? That's a wonderful life, and that life is yours. And as you wake up to it, as we shake off and remove the blocks that have imprisoned us all this time, and we begin to enjoy the freedom of happiness and peace and joy and transparency, life becomes wonderful because you have now what? You have a purpose beyond any other purpose on this planet. There's no purpose on this planet much greater than you being the light of the world, than you fulfilling the purpose that God has given you, regardless of where you are, what position you're in, right where you are in this very moment. We begin to trust. We begin to trust. We begin to have confidence in that the truth is true. And our very presence begin to change the environment that we're in. Because this truth is emanating from us, it's affecting our environment. It'll affect your relationship with yourself, first of all, and your relationship with God. Then it'll affect your relationship, your most intimate relationship. And then it'll continue to spread out beyond. And you become the reconciliation of the world. You become the savior of the world, of your world. Yes, yes, yes. I am not going to be able to finish Workbook Lesson 181. So this is part one. Part two will be coming tomorrow. So don't miss it. We're going to learn something in here that will absolutely transform you. So stay with me, okay? Thank you so much for being here. We love you so much. Go out and have a great day. Allow this truth to set you free. Allow this shift in perception to see humanity in a whole different light. We'll finish that thought on tomorrow. Thank you. We'll see you then. Bye bye.